You've stepped off the lighted road and onto a path that few return from. Welcome to the hunting path 1408. Tonight's story is one that should have never been told. Chapter 4. The late spring had fully bloomed into early summer. The woods around the cabin were thick with vibrant green leaves, the air alive with the buzz of insects and the calls of birds. Their routine was established now, a quiet rhythm of survival. Mornings were for checking snares and fishing, afternoons for practicing with the guns and exploring the woods, evenings for a simple meal by the fire and listening to the static on the radio, still hoping for a sign of hope. One afternoon, David went out hunting alone. They were running low on their canned food stores, and he needed to try and bring back something substantial. Lily stayed at the cabin, sketching in her notebook and practicing her knot tying. The hours stretched on, and the sun began to dip towards the horizon. Lily started to feel a prickle of worry. David was usually back by now. She was sitting on the porch, watching the shadows lengthen, when she finally saw him emerge from the tree line. He was walking slowly, favoring one leg, and he wasn't carrying anything. As he got closer, Lily saw his face was pale and drawn. A grimace of pain etched around his mouth.
"Dad, are you okay?"
She called out, running to meet him.
"Just a little banged up, Lil,"
he said, leaning heavily on a fallen branch he was using as a makeshift crutch. His jeans were torn at the knee, and blood was seeping through the fabric.
"What happened?"
Lily asked, her voice filled with concern.
"Tripped,"
he said, his breath coming in short gasps.
"Stupid fall. Landed on a sharp rock. It's deep."
Back at the cabin, Lily helped him carefully roll up his pant leg. The gash on his knee was deep and jagged, already looking angry and inflamed. David cleaned it as best he could with water from the pump and some antiseptic wipes from the first aid kit, but he winced with every touch.
"Does it hurt really bad?"
Lily asked, her lower lip trembling as she saw the wound.
"Yeah, low bug. It stings,"
he admitted, trying to smile reassuringly, but it didn't quite reach his eyes.
"But I'll be fine. Just need to rest it."
Over the next few days, the wound didn't improve. It grew redder, swollen, and a dark, unhealthy color spread around the edges. Red streaks began to creep up his leg. David became feverish, his skin hot to the touch, his eyes glassy. He was in pain, and he grew weaker with each passing hour. The small cabin, usually a place of comfort, now felt heavy with sickness and worry. Lily took on the role of nurse and provider, her small shoulders bearing a weight far too heavy for her age. She fetched water from the well, the bucket heavy in her hands, her arms aching. She made him weak broth from their dwindling supplies, carefully heating it on the propane stove. She changed the dressing on his wound, her stomach churning at the sight and smell of the spreading infection, trying not to cry, trying to be brave like he had taught her.
"Does it feel any better, Dad?"
she'd ask, her voice small and hopeful.
"A little, sweetie."
He'd lie, his voice raspy, sweat beading on his forehead.
"You're doing a good job."
She'd read to him from her books, her favorite stories of brave heroes in faraway lands, trying to distract him from the pain, trying to bring a little light into the dim cabin. She'd sit by his bunk, holding his hand, his skin burning with fever.
"I wish I could make you better."
She whispered one afternoon, tears silently tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. David squeezed her hand weakly.
"You are, Lil. Just by being here. You're the bravest person I know."
But he continued to get worse. The infection raged through his body. He became delirious, muttering things that didn't make sense, his eyes unfocused. The low moans started, soft at first, then growing stronger, more frequent. Lily's fear grew with each passing hour. She remembered their conversation by the lake, the grim promise she had made. It couldn't be happening, not to him.
"Remember what we talked about, Lil?"
David whispered one evening, his voice raspy, his breath smelling foul. the words slurring together. His eyes, though still his, held a strange, unfocused look, but there was a flicker of recognition, a desperate plea in their depths. Lily's heart clenched, a vice tightening in her chest. She knew what he was talking about. The conversation they had had about the infected, about what to do if he got sick.
Yes, Dad.
She whispered back, tears streaming down her face, blurring her vision.
You have to be strong, Lilybug,
he said, reaching out a trembling hand to touch her cheek, his touch surprisingly cold despite the fever.
Stronger than I was. You have to do it. Before it's too late.
His hand fell back onto the blanket.
No, Dad, you'll get better.
She sobbed, clinging to his hand, pressing it to her cheek.
Please, don't leave me.
He shook his head slowly, a movement that seemed to take immense effort.
No, Lil. I won't. I can feel it. It's happening.
His grip on her hand tightened, then loosened. His eyes fluttered closed, and his breathing became shallow, ragged. Lily sat by his side through the long night, listening to his labored breathing, watching the subtle, horrifying changes begin to take hold. The fever spiked, his body convulsed violently, and the rasping breaths turned into those familiar, guttural moans she had heard in the grocery store, in the streets. His eyes snapped open, but they were no longer David's eyes. They were milky and vacant, filled with that same mindless hunger she had seen in the grocery store, a hunger directed now at her. He started to sit up, his movements jerky and unnatural, his head tilting to the side. Lily scrambled back, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, the promise she had made echoing in her ears like a death knell. Tears blinded her, hot and heavy, but she knew what she had to do. He wasn't Dad anymore. She stumbled towards the locked cabinet, her hands fumbling with the key, her fingers clumsy with fear and grief. She pulled out the rifle, the one David had taught her to use, the one he had shown her how to use to protect herself. It felt impossibly heavy in her trembling hands, cold and unforgiving. She fumbled with the bolt, chambering around, the metallic click echoing in the small cabin, a sound that sealed her fate and his. Her father, or the thing that used to be her father, was now standing, swaying, his head tilted, that awful moan filling the air. He turned towards her, his arms outstretched, his gait shuffling and uneven, a grotesque parody of a hug.
Dad!
She whispered, one last time, a desperate, broken plea, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a sign that he was still in there somewhere. There was no recognition in those vacant eyes, only hunger, the hunger of the infected. Taking a shaky breath that hitched in her throat, Lily raised the rifle. She remembered David's words, his lessons. Aim for the head, end his misery, survive. Survive for both of them. With a sob that tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief and terror, she pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the small cabin, the sound ringing in her ears. The figure crumpled to the floor, the unnatural movement ceasing. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, broken only by Lily's ragged breathing and the sound of her own heartbroken sobs. She stood there for a long time, the rifle still in her hands, staring at the still form on the floor. It was over. He was gone. The man who had protected her, taught her, loved her, was gone. The rest of the day was a blur of grief and grim determination. With shaking hands, Lily cleaned up the cabin, the mundane task a strange anchor in the storm of her emotions. She dragged her father's body outside, the weight almost too much for her small frame, the coldness of his skin a stark contrast to the fever that had consumed him just hours before. She found a shovel and, with tearful, back-breaking effort, dug a grave near the lake, under the large oak tree where they had often sat and talked. She buried him, wrapped in his favorite blanket, placing his worn fishing hat on top of the freshly turned earth, a small, sad marker. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lily walked to the dock. She picked up her fishing rod, the one David had helped her choose, the one he had taught her to use. Her eyes were red and swollen, her body aching with exhaustion and sorrow. She baited the hook automatically, a task she had done so many times with him, the muscle memory a cruel reminder of his absence. She cast her line into the still water, the gentle plop the only sound in the quiet evening. She sat there, the familiar weight of the rod in her hands, the vast emptiness of the lake stretching before her, the silence amplifying her grief. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent and unending, mingling with the cool evening air. Eventually she felt a tug on the line. She reeled it in, a small catfish flashing silver in the fading light. She unhooked it, her movements mechanical, her mind numb. Back at the cabin, she cleaned and cooked the fish over the dying embers of the fire, the smell strangely comforting. A small piece of their old routine. She sat on the porch, the plate of fish in her lap. She took a bite, the taste of the lake, of survival filling her mouth. And as she ate, alone in the quiet wilderness, the tears flowed freely, hot and heavy, for the father she had lost, for the promise she had been forced to keep, and for the world that was gone. The fish tasted like ash and sorrow, but she ate it all, a testament to her survival, a lonely, brave girl in a broken world. You've reached the end of this story, but the path doesn't stop here. Shadows still stir, the walls still whisper. So if you're still listening, you've taken another step down the haunting path 1408. Subscribe if you dare to walk it again.